This is a 5-minute version of a 20-minute presentation made at Learning and Teaching Day on the 23rd of May 2011 concerning lecturing and visual rhetoric. My colleague Neil McLean had produced a very interesting description of Aristotle's articulation of rhetoric, and I went on to ask questions about how we use text and how we use text as the primary means of communication very often in our lecturing contexts, how we think about it as a visual. So the first thing I did was to look at the way in which Aristotelian accounts of rhetoric might be represented visually, and to ask whether that added anything to the process of understanding, and suggested perhaps that even a visual metaphor, such as a Greek temple with its 3 pillars, might aid in the use of text. I went on to ask why it's become acceptable to produce very large chunks of text and to repeat over and over again this idea that one produces text and then reads it out. Students are busy trying to read what's on the screen whilst actually listening to you. They're not necessarily reading at the same time. There's that disjuncture between you and what's on the screen. They read ahead and so on. That it's simply a poorly used tool. The tool itself, very often PowerPoint, is inherently not bad, but is used very poorly. And so I wanted to suggest that one needs to go through a process of identifying the ideas, identifying the key thoughts and processes that one is trying to communicate, and then use the tool effectively to construct that. And if you genuinely see it as a revision tool, then full references make more sense than simply name dates, and you start to see the tool as having a capacity to communicate effectively. But it is limited in terms of how much and how readable and how useful it becomes, and it very quickly becomes a list of things to think about. I talked at Learning and Teaching Day about these 6 elements that go into building a visual argument, and yet very quickly myself found myself wanting to overfill these slides. So I took a slightly different turn and suggested that text itself is a visual, that there are times when one wants to display a series of slides because the argument that one's following is essentially a visual step-by-step one, but that one of the advantages of tools such as Prezi is that it does allow you to represent text in terms of its visual positioning, its overlay, its juxtaposition with other things, including of course with other text. So the ability to drill down allows you to go in and represent different levels of complexity, and I'll illustrate this again in a moment. Or because one wants to actually show that there might be, say, 2 sides of an argument, one might actually do that, representing text visually in opposing forms. What I really wanted to do was to get some feedback from participants about pictures, and we used Twitter on the day. I showed images and suggested that the images themselves inherently might not be taken for a particular purpose, but their use would be helpful and useful for other forms of cognitive engagement on the part of students. Here we talked about what different things this might represent. Was it about the North-South divide? Was it about gender differences? Was it about physical violence? Was it about interracial harmony? It could be any number of things. Was this about the fact that women are objectified? Is it about the fact that there is a sense of cool, calm, dispassionate tendency within fashion? How are the elderly represented? Are they represented in positive ways, in negative ways? We looked at images which allowed you to superimpose text in such that you could build an argument, that you could draw students into the visual in order to reach an understanding of the kind of argument that you wanted them to take on board. The use of Prezi to actually layer text was explored, the idea that one can position text in different ways, hide things, the fact that one can actually place text on a visual and within a visual was also explored and discussed. And I think the conclusion in part was that traditional PowerPoint isn't absolutely dead, but that actually there are now lots of new ways in which a very young lecturer, such as Harry Aristotle, coming into our universities today would be able to engage. And that there is support and resource out there, including a project that I've been involved with called the Dial-E. So it was really an exploration